All right, folks. The hour has drawn nigh. Of course, I grabbed the one music stand that doesn't really work properly. That's how it works. Handouts. Yonder. Should you like? Oh, there it is. It's coming on.
It's got noise here.
That's the idea. Where was I? I was on. Two.
Speaking of dogs.
So let's begin with this. St. Francis of Assisi. You can show your love to others by not wishing that they should be better Christians. For many, many years, this quote was translated without the not, because it was thought that there's no way that a saint such as Francis would ever say, you can show your love to others by not wishing that they should be better Christians. Well, that can't be right. Surely what he meant to say was you can show your love to others by wishing that they should be better Christians, right? That's the one that makes sense to us. So clearly that's what he meant. Scholars don't think, oh, actually, no, he had it right the first time. What he meant to say was what he actually said. You can show your love to others by not wishing that they should be better Christians. Now, what on earth could that possibly mean?
Accepting people.
Accepting
They
people.
are. Not having a superiority complex.
Oh.
That's the big one, I think.
Yeah. To wish anybody should be something other than they are assumes that you know what they should be. It assumes that they're not who they should be. They're something other than they should be, and I can tell them exactly how they should be.
Special. If only we knew all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to think that when you think about politics.
It's hard to think that when you think that about politics. I think it's hard to think that when you see people who are not living whole and healthy lives. You have loved ones in our families who have addiction issues, they've got anger issues, they've got trust issues, whatever it is, right? Or any number of things. And we want for them whole and healthy lives, I think, right? That's ultimately there's a side of us that might be leaning into that judgmental, holier than thou, I know what's best for you. But there's another side of that that's just, I want loved ones to be healthy and whole. And I think the second one is not just okay, is good, right? We should want health and well-being for everybody. But if it comes from that place of superiority, if it comes from that place of judgment, the difference is monumental, right? they almost feel the same, but they're not at all, right? And so last week, as we opened this discussion on holiness, I've had a difficult time with that word throughout my life, right? Because I've understood it as this moral superiority. That to be holy is to somehow be morally excellent. It's to avoid sin, and by sin, what I meant was keeping all the rules as I was taught and understood them to be. And that was not just hard, but impossible. And the people who I thought understood themselves to be holy were precisely the arrogant, judgmental people that I did not want to be.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? And I think the alternative is to redefine holiness not as moral excellence, but as being a whole person. Right? That God wants us to be whole and healthy human beings. And if that's what God wants for us, there are ways that we can move towards it that in no way suggest that we are not already fully beloved and accepted just as we are. Right? This has to be this basis place that we start from. last week I used that commencement speech from David Foster Wallace, just the beginning of the fish, right? Two fish swimming along the bottom of the sea, and an older fish swims by the other two young fish. The old fish says to the young ones, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on by, and one says to the other, "What the hell is water?" I don't know. And the point of David Foster Wallace's commencement speech is that the things that are most significant in the sustaining of our lives are the things that we are most ignorant of. And I suggested to you that from a Christian perspective, that water is the unchangeable love of God. This is what we swim in and around, is what we are sustained by. That we already have all the approval from God we could ever possibly want. That there is no amount of achievement that God is looking for us or from us. All God has ever wanted for us is to be healthy and whole. And to the extent that we are not, it still doesn't change one lick of how God feels about us, right? That is already, it's the water in which we swim. And then the trick in holiness is not about, like I said, achieving something that you've already gotten. It's about moving towards wholeness. And so we use this, made mention of this kind of three-part model of the human brain. Now, I was informed this past week that I had some of the sizes of it not quite right. Reptilian brain, the brain stem, the cerebellum, these things control the fight or flight mechanisms. We really have very little control over that part of our brain, right? Because it's simply this most basic part that we share with all other reptiles and animals. But there are actually things we can do. There are things we can do. And then we have our mammalian brain, the one step above. In evolutionary history, these control emotions, memories, habits, decisions. This begins to form and come online in our infancy. And then, of course, our neocortex being the most advanced part of our human brain. And this is where language, abstract thought, imagination, consciousness, reactions, all these things come from. Now, the problem, I think, with Christian discipleship, as it's often been taught, is that we often start at the neocortex and try to work our way down. James Smith is a Reformed theologian who's written a lot about Christian education. I found his work really helpful. And he writes, I got this in your handout, Christian education has absorbed a philosophical anthropology that sees human persons as primarily thinking things. So forget the philosophical anthropology. That what Christian education has primarily understood us to be is thinkers. That's been the mode of understanding for what education is. The result has been an understanding of education that largely, in terms of information, more specifically, the end of Christian education has been to see the dissemination and communication of Christian ideas rather than the formation of particular people. So the goal of Christian education, according to Smith, has been getting the proper ideas into the heads of people, and if we do that, the rest of it will follow. If any of you have ever been trained in like Christian worldview thinking, which I'm guessing a lot of you probably haven't, and maybe that's for the best. But there's this whole slew of Christian formation that comes particularly out of the Reformed tradition, of which we are a part of, that suggests that if we just get people's worldviews correct, if we can inform every part of their thinking from a Christian perspective, then the rest will fall into place. And James Smith, coming from this tradition, says it's not working. Being a disciple of Jesus is not primarily a matter of getting the right ideas and doctrines and beliefs into your head in order to guarantee proper behavior. Rather, it's a matter of being the kind of person who loves rightly, who love God and neighbor and is oriented to the world by the primacy of that love. So according to Smith, the primary goal of the Christian disciple should not be to get proper ideas in the head, but instead to shape what we love. So how do we shape what we love? How do we learn to love rightly? If that's the problem of what human sin is really about, disordered love, this is our problem. We love the wrong things, or we love them in the wrong proportion. We seek one thing for ultimacy, and it doesn't actually deliver when we should be seeking these other things. How do we learn to love rightly and in right proportion? I think the most helpful definition to me of faith and idolatry that I've known comes from theologian named Paul Tillich. And Paul Tillich describes faith as ultimate concern. What you have faith in is what you're ultimately concerned with. I like this definition because then it removes the definition of faith from religious ideas necessarily.
Because couldn't you be a humanist?
An atheist, a Buddhist, anything. Every human being is ultimately concerned with something. And whatever we're ultimately concerned with, according to Tillich, is what we put our faith in. So healthy faith would be being ultimately concerned with that which is ultimate. Right? Which is another way of saying having our loves properly ordered. And idolatrous faith, then, is the inverse of that, being ultimately concerned with something that is not ultimate. So they're kind of wordy definitions, but they're really, really helpful and ultimately pretty easy to remember. What's an idol? It's not a statue that you bow down and pray to necessarily, though I suppose it could be. An idol is putting our ultimate concern, our deepest loves, into things that are not truly ultimate. And any time that we do that, we worship an idol and we will be disappointed. So what are some of the ultimate concerns that we as human beings have that are not truly ultimate? Let's name a few. Money. Absolutely.
Money. Capitalism.
Capitalism as a system, as a whole, that the pursuit of capital is in and of itself a good. That the growth of capital is in and of itself a good. Say what you mean by decently in order, Gene.
Being more concerned with how it is opposed to what it is.
Being more concerned with procedures, perhaps.
Procedure, neatness, straightness,
Yeah.
rightness.
And you're all about that.
I am.
And
He said lovingly.
if anybody doesn't know, Gene suggests this phrase of decently in order is exceedingly Presbyterian. I'd even say it's exceedingly PCUSA Presbyterian. Other Presbyterians I've hung out with don't use this language quite as much as we do. It's one of our calling cards. And it is a gift and it is a liability, like anything else. In fact, I would suggest you cannot have an idol that is not in and of itself inherently good. It doesn't matter what the idol is, it's good. It's a good thing. It's part of God's good created world. Everything God created is good. So whatever it is that we're trying to put that ultimate concern in, making money, having human relationships, sexual intimacy, what else? Sex, drugs, rock and roll. How about politics? Right? Putting our ultimate concern in a party, in a platform, in candidates. Now, does it matter what party, platform, and candidates are leading our civic life? Absolutely it does. When we put our ultimate concern in these things that are not ultimate, what happens? We create idols. So learning to love rightly is about learning to get our loves in proper order. Now I put down here on this handout for you, all trauma is pre-verbal. Anybody read this book? Body Keeps the Score. Oh yeah, Bessel van der Kolk. What a weird book to make it to the top of the New York Times bestseller list for about how many years now? Never a decade ago. This is a very long theoretical book that makes some really extraordinary claims about the body and health and human healing. Van der Kolk is a trauma therapist who's worked with particularly veterans of the Vietnam War. And he and his colleagues helped actually create the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. They invented it based on their interaction and working with Vietnam vets. And what they found, what Van der Kolk has found, and others, many others with him. And as always, whenever there's a breakthrough in a field, Van der Kolk's book broke through to the mainstream for whatever reason. There's an army of other people that were doing the same work along with them. He's become the celebrity. There are others who are like, yeah, we've been doing this work the whole time too. True, but his work somehow made it through. And what he and his colleagues have found in treating Vietnam vets is that just like Christian discipleship has largely been trying to work from the neocortex down, so has therapy. Therapy in the Western world has largely been about what we call the talking cure. That if you just talk about your past enough, talk about the difficult things that happened to you, strained relationships with your parents, a la Freud, or whomever, that if we just talk about these things enough, we're going to find healing. And what van der Kolk and his colleagues found is that the problem with that approach is that trauma doesn't actually lodge itself in the neocortex. It lives in the other parts of the brain. And so if we're always trying to talk at our reptilian brain, we shouldn't expect it to respond, because the reptilian brain don't talk. It don't know language. It reacts, it doesn't talk. Same thing in the brain. So for van der Kolk, he suggests that all trauma, it actually lives and lodges itself in our bodies in parts that are not connected necessarily to neocortex. And so I think I've got this. I need to make sure I have a different handout than yours, so I don't remember what's on yours. Oh yes, I got this quote on yours. Trauma results in a fundamental reorganization of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. It changes not only how we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. We have discovered that helping victims of trauma find words to describe what has happened to them is profoundly meaningful, but usually isn't enough. The act of telling the story doesn't necessarily alter the automatic physical and hormonal responses of bodies that remain hypervigilant, prepared to be assaulted or violated at any time. For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed and to live in the reality of the present. So what trauma does to our bodies is it convinces our bodies pre-verbally that we are still in danger. Something happened to us along the way, whatever that something is. And we see this very acutely in things that are really significant events, like a car accident, right? Some event that took place. Does it also take place over long-strained relationships, growing up in an unstable household? Absolutely. But trauma can also just be these really difficult events. A sudden death, an accident, something really painful happens. And if any of you have gone through those things, you may find that it's difficult to sleep. You may find that it's difficult to relax. That loud noises that in some way, shape, or form connect you with whatever has happened, and you're right back into that hyper-vigilant fight or flight state. Does anybody here know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So what van der Kolk and others have found is that the way to actually treat that part of our bodies isn't just through talking. He's not against the talking cure. All about talking. I'm doing right now. I'm great at talking. But it's not enough. Well, we need to learn our practices that can teach our older parts of our brain that we are safe now. That the trauma of the past is no longer in the present. And the way to do that is by learning how to love God with our bodies. So, I want to hear from you all. What are things that you have done to love God with your body, to teach yourself that you are safe now? And you don't have to be hyper vigilant to the degree that you used to be in order to keep yourself safe. What do you do to care for your body and love your body well?
Walking in nature.
Walking in nature. Yeah.
Meditation.
Meditation. We're definitely going to talk a little bit about meditation. What does meditation look like to you?
Going inside. I have trouble walking
Mm-hmm.
in nature,
Mhm.
which used to be my one thing.
Yeah.
But so now I go inside breathing and meditation, calming. Yeah, you go inside and you breathe and you concentrate on the body and all the parts of the body and the brain, the soul, the mind.
Breath work. And as you probably have all heard, there are just gobs and gobs of studies coming out on all these nature walks, you're hearing this term forest bathing. Have you heard of this term?
Sure.
Comes out of Japan.
Oh,
And you just think, do we really need studies that show us that it's good for the human person to walk quietly in nature? Don't we already know that? Well, yes, we do on an intuitive and experiential basis. We know it to be true, but now we're having all kinds of studies that show actually it's really, really good for the human body to walk through calmness of nature and bathe oneself. And I do like the word bathing because I like to walk in nature a lot, but you know what I have in while I do it? My earbuds! So you see me here from,
listen.
I know when I'm here in the office, how often am I walking to go get my cup of tea while catching up on a podcast or on the latest song or whatever it is that I'm listening to? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but that's not forest bathing. Forest bathing is the intentional shutting off of all those noises to listen to what's happening around you, to feel the wind on your body, to hear the wind through the trees, to just calm that little reptilian brain down a little bit.
Reptilian brain says, why am I living on Highland in the winter?
Yes. Yeah, finding ways to calm oneself in the cold winter months is important. Absolutely. Any yoga practitioners here? Do we know about doyogawithme.com? Oh, now you do. Yeah. There's doyogawithme.com. 500 plus free on-demand yoga classes, meditations, and more. Like anybody, there were years I was a user of this website for many, many years, and eventually, and their whole goal was we're going to keep this free for everybody, and they did for a very, very long time. And there are still gobs of videos up there for free. But like everybody else in the online space, they made a subscription service too, because guess what? It costs a lot of money to host all of these videos and do it for free. But if you want to learn a way to use your body and cultivate quietness in your mind and in your reptilian brain and your mammalian brain all at the same time, yoga is a great, great way to do just that. And fascinatingly, the data backs that up as well. This is also from Vanderkolk's Body Keeps the Score. Yoga turned out to be a terrific way to regain a relationship with the interior world, and with it, a caring, loving, sensual relationship to the self. If you are not aware of what your body needs, you cannot take care of it. So, finding practices, whatever they may be, to engage your body in a loving, caring, and gentle way is a wonderful way to cultivate healthy practices that learn to calm that mammalian part of our brain and reptilian part of our brain. What else have you all done? Talked about forest bathing, brought up yoga. What else do you do to take care of your body? Tori?
I'm going to rebelliously not directly answer your question, but share my dad's thing.
Cool.
So dad's 98, and he hasn't been very well at all for the last year and a half. One of his favorite things to do when he was well was to be down at his workbench and fix things. And he would repair small appliances, he would cane chairs, those kinds of things. And he had lots of neat little things at his workbench. And he's not well enough to stand that long anymore. But he has been able to do a few simple projects, and I see the lift in his mood. He rewired a lamp.
Yeah.
He glued back together a broken bed slat. I believe that in working with these small items at his bench by himself with his hands, that this is his meditation. And I believe I see his mood lift a bit and his mind clear a bit after he's done these things. So I'm just a big advocate for any small thing. I like knitting.
Yes.
When I do other things, it helps me pay attention better because it quiets my mind to knit. But knitting, tinkering, any little thing that folks like to do with their hands.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very difficult, I think, to focus on a project like that, whatever it is, woodworking, wiring, If you are in that zone, you're not thinking about the trauma, which is good, right? You're engaging with the parts of your brain. You're allowing yourself to calm down. So there's any number of ways to engage that aren't necessarily obvious. But anytime we're getting into that kind of zone space, I think we're in healthy healing places. Bob?
Mindless activity,
Like what?
mowing the lawn.
Mowing the lawn. Yes, what if mowing the lawn became a part of your wellness practice? Right? And you can do this with anything. Washing the dishes. Any activity that, especially maybe those that you find not enjoyable, what if they became opportunities and invitations for you to mindful engagement with the world around you? Brother Lawrence is a famous monk who wrote a book called Practicing the Presence of God. A wonderful book, really short read, and it's all about how he met God while washing dishes at the monastery. Which is doing the thing, whatever the thing is in front of you. And again, this is, by the way, these are all things that I need to grow in profoundly. Because what am I doing while I'm washing the dishes? I'm listening to Common Man and T-Bone every day. Again, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's certainly monkey mind activities, just pure entertainment, which isn't bad, but creating space for just quiet while I'm mowing the lawn or washing the dishes or doing anything else.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How would you, a pet, a dog or a cat or a bird, whatever, a pet in your life, and I'm not talking about grandchildren, children, a pet,
Yeah.
What do you have in mind? Yeah.
Soothing, is that a good therapy? Can be, not what you're talking about.
We have really cool studies now on how when people who, we've all been in that space where the doctor walks in the room, you're sitting there waiting, you're in your underwear, and you're sitting around forever, what's the doctor doing? Finally, the doctor walks in the door, the big moment's arrived. And how many of us have been in that situation and we forget the three things we meant to ask the doctor?
Right.
So of course you write them down, which is really good. We have cool studies now on how when you just bring a therapy dog into the waiting room with the person, they suddenly remember all the things they're supposed to do because that part of their brain is being calm. I suspect in the next couple decades we're going to see the explosion of therapy dogs in all spheres of our lives because it does exactly that. It calms us down and allows us to access what it does. And so what do you see there? It's a perfect example of the tripartite thing in the brain. If you calm the lower parts with whatever the source is, in this case, let's say it's a dog, then all of a sudden you have access to the neocortex. Now I remember those language, logical things I was supposed to bring up, but I can't when I'm stressed out because doctor's here and suddenly I lose my brain.
You can also bring the opposite when the animal or pet gets sick.
Yeah.
Then you have that high anxiety, so you have to balance.
Yeah. Sheila.
I have the sweetest thing, well, when Dave passed away 2 years ago, I have some younger friends in the complex and they have a big dog. And they would bring the dog over and leave her with me during the day to keep me company. Isn't that just the sweetest thing?
Yeah, and it helps, didn't it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and people must realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I've got her for a whole week while they're on vacation.
Nice. What a thoughtful
Work me
gift.
after that one. she's great.
What a thoughtful gift.
Yeah. I'm dog sitters.
I did therapy in Ohio State for 20 years.
Yeah.
And we would go into a certain care unit and referring units. And I'm a retired nurse, so my eyes would go to the monitor with people. And we would spend time with people. And when I walked down, I'd check it again, blood pressure went down.
Yes.
Down. And the next week, when I would go in, the nurses would say, oh, it's such a good thing for Mr. So-and-so, this is so-and-so, and it's such a good day.
Yeah. Yeah. These things that we've known and perhaps been embarrassed about, that sometimes it's the furry creatures in our lives that allow us to calm down, that we can experience the giving and receiving of love. And depending on your how you grew up, that might be a bit shameful for you. At least it has been for me. Animals are fine, but people. People are what God cares about. Okay? God cares about all of it.
They're family members.
God made all of it. Yeah. Any of you have lost pets? Yeah, that it can be, right? And when we do, it can be hugely affecting. So one thing about loving God with our bodies that I think we need to talk about and consider as well is what we put into them. And so that relates to what we eat. It relates to what we drink. One thing that the neocortex is not very good at is judging risks in proportion to their actual existence. So, in the past year, there have been 480 mass shootings in the U.S. This was as of this morning, leaving more than 475 people dead, 2,100 people injured, according to the Gun Violence Archive. Now, that's awful, right? And it's a national shame. It's something we spend a lot of time and anxiety and effort. And we at this church just spent money, significant amounts, to have all these windows now be shatterproof for guns. Fine, it's all good. I mean, great. What's the actual risk of something like this happening to us? Exceedingly low. Exceedingly low. We spend lots of our time and our resources and our imagination and our anxiety on these things that aren't all that likely.
Well,
I
it
mean,
did happen a couple of years ago.
it happens. Yes, it happens. And when it does,
The night we got a call.
it lodges itself in our memories in a way that we start to think, oh, that's the real threat.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, so it was what? 475 people dead in this past year. Okay? Excessive alcohol use, 178,000 people die every year. 480 versus 178,000. Are we good at judging what are real threats to us? We're terrible at it. And part of that's because we just are, when we think of idols in our culture, alcohol consumption is an absolute idol. When we step away from it, we start to examine the shows that we watch and love, and I do too. A show is as innocent and as funny as like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's a wonderful, on the scale of like sitcoms, wholesome and hilarious show that was on for many years. And how many episodes in a season are all of them binge drinking at the end of the shift? Many of them. And guess what? They're all cops. Probably not an inaccurate description of how many, many people in that line of work deal with the stress and the trauma they're exposed to day in and day out of this work that is deeply stressful and often dehumanizing. And the way we deal with that is not by English. And granted, it wouldn't be any fun if they didn't show in yoga and meditation, right? There'd be no fun in that. But it sure would be a lot healthier. So I worry greatly about this because, by the way, that 178,000 is up 30% from 2016 to where we are now. So huge, there's an epidemic going on of alcohol consumption in our midst, and we're often blind to it, and not just blind to it, but openly celebrating the excesses of it. And I'm not a teetotaler, but I worry greatly about how this is affecting us in ways that we don't even see.
Very counterintuitive, but just recently I saw that alcohol consumption in the state of Ohio is down significantly since COVID.
It's gone down. I would love to see that. That's great.
Which is putting companies out of business.
Well, we are seeing,
Distillers.
yeah, we are seeing the fastest growing aspect of microbreweries right now is amongst alcohol-free So there is, since, COVID was a major, I'll just be honest. Did I start drinking more during COVID than I do normally? Yes, I did. And I think lots of us did. Wine with DeWine.
Yeah.
Only I wasn't having wine.
Why has it gone down? I don't understand.
Well, maybe it has, since that time. I'd love to see these numbers. I'm looking at 2016 to 2024, but maybe there was a change in that time. But what I know we're seeing in terms of the emergence of non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic spirits, is we are seeing that a lot of people are going, whoa, I've gone too far. Whoa, I got comfortable with what used to be 1 or 2 per week, now is 2 to 3 to 5 per day, to 8 per 9 per 10 on celebration days. And suddenly I'm drinking way past what's healthy or good for my body. Yeah, Tori.
Like some of you know, my daughter is currently working as a bartender. And she clues me into things that I don't know about. Like I didn't know about Sober October.
Yes.
It's a trend to not drink in October among the younger people, but then on Halloween, they begin to imbibe again all through the holidays. And then in January,
You try again.
many folks don't drink alcohol in January. And I think that this is likely even a 20-something perspective on, hey, we go a little too far sometimes. Let's do what we can to be moderate. And I just thought it was interesting because I didn't know about it.
Yeah, there's a whole sober curious movement that is, if this is an issue at all in your life or in someone else's life that you care about, just start looking for sober curious. There's a whole movement that's going on. There's actually really helpful apps too that are great at helping one moderate. One is called Reframes, another one called Sunnyside. These are really, really important tools to utilize. And for myself, I had a dry Thanksgiving. I'm going to have a dry Christmas. I grew up in a family that when you got confirmed, you were allowed to have a glass of wine on special occasions. Just fine, that was all it was. But I was 13, 14 years old, having a glass of wine at Thanksgiving. So I realized in 2024, when I didn't have anything to drink on Thanksgiving or the holidays, and I'm not going to over Christmas either, I realized it had been since 1990 that I've not had a truly dry Thanksgiving. That's a long time. It's a long time. So I bring this up with some levels of personal revelation, but we gotta find ways to love God with our bodies. And then how about complicating all of that is the legalization of marijuana, and soon, right on its heels and already here, are all of the hallucinogens. They're all here. And I'm not against any of them necessarily. I don't want to go back towards making these things illegal. But I always perceive America as an exceedingly adolescent nation. That whatever we're dealing with, we respond in an adolescent way. So when you make something that I think probably should be legal to adolescents, we should expect the excesses, the lack of moderation, the lack of responsible usage. They're going to come right along with it. And so take hallucinogens. Are there all kinds of potentially helpful therapeutic usages for precisely these issues with the brain and with trauma? Absolutely. I think there probably are. And right along with that are going to be, I've witnessed it now, folks who are, at the bar and, hey, we're having my shots and you want some mushrooms with it? No. No thanks. No thanks. So I bring this up to say we have a significant invitation and challenge in front of us, and I believe it's going to get significantly more needed in the years to come as we boldly move into all kinds of new substances.
The problem was that
Yeah.
the time of Christ. I mean, the Bible is full of the wine.
Yes, it's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. There are some who think that hallucinogens were part of the early Christian movement. I think it's a pretty minor group, but there are some who actually think the Eucharist was a hallucinogenic meal. I don't believe that, but there are folks out there who believe that. I also think, from what I understand of more directly like alcohol consumption, In the same way that you baby boomers knew something about weed in the 1960s and 70s, the weed today is way stronger than what you were using back then or your friends were using back then. Same thing with alcohol. They did not have distilled spirits in Palestine 2,000 years ago. Not to the level that we have. So, was there abuse? I'm sure there was. That's why the Bible addresses it, right? It does come up about drunkenness, right? There are these verses. So it was clearly a part of it, a part of the culture just like it is now. I suspect that we are like we are with anything else, making it stronger, more potent than ever before. Which doesn't make us worse than them or better than them. It's just a recognition that with our technological advances, we always push an envelope in every way. Sorry.
I would just kick in as a wine lover. David Connolly does a great spiel on our copiers of the Bible prior to the printing press. You know, they would sit in these rooms and just copy the Bible by the hour, day after day. And sometimes their pay was in glasses of wine or mugs of beer. And David threw into the mix that our water sources back in the day were not always entirely reliable and safe. But in a literal sense, the alcohol did kind of kill the germ.
Absolutely.
So in some ways, to drink beer or wine was safer back in the day
That's right.
than to drink water, which could end in dysentery or other waterborne illnesses. So,
That's right.
but we have water treatment plants now.
That's right. And we should know all that's true, and I'm not against these things, but we should just also know that we have been lied to when it comes to the health benefits of any type of alcohol, not least red wine. It's all been funded by the industries that are selling them to you. None of it's true. It's all bad for you. The question is obviously in terms of amounts. So those, as I read about it, it's really about poison dosage. Alcohol's poison. It is. But certain amounts are obviously more poisonous than others. So, Karen.
In all of this talk of alcohol and everything, haven't mentioned those people like me
Yeah.
who have an addictive personality.
Yeah.
An addictive body.
Yep.
And I mean, I haven't had a drink in 40 years.
Good for you.
I
You know
knew
your
I
limits.
had a drinking problem.
Yeah.
But I wasn't an alcoholic until about 8 years later.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so, but I mean, addiction is a horrible thing.
It is. And knowing that about oneself, that there are certain. See, even as I'm speaking about these things, I'm not suggesting everybody needs to become total abstinence people. I'm not. But there are folks in our midst who it is just wise and good self-care and love of self to do exactly that.
Recognize that, you know, if you drink yourself into a blackout, it's not a good thing.
Yes, that's right.
Sugar,
Go ahead.
sugar is very addictive.
Yeah, sugar
And
too. I know.
when I was in rehab for 2 months, and I became addicted to sugar again because the nutrition there was so horrible. I mean, they put salt and sugar in everything.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to control. I noticed that I'm addicted to sugar.
Yeah.
But I'm not diabetic.
Well, I call it being a chocoholic.
Dave, you
I
agree with
had
that?
that problem, but yeah,
As
there's
the,
but sugar is so massive in our food system
It
and
is.
salt. Sugar and salt.
Go ahead.
Has the wine issue come up at any session meetings recently?
What about the wine issue? What do you mean by that?
Well, that kept coming up at session meetings, is whether to allow wine at receptions here.
Oh, we haven't had a reception here since I've been here because people don't get married in churches anymore. Or if they do, they certainly don't have receptions in churches anymore. So it has not come up.
It was a real issue and it kept getting turned down here.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, St. Mark's always has wine.
Yes, and you can trace a church's attitudes about alcohol usually to their denominational stances during Prohibition.
And
So where was Prohibition born in America?
Westerville.
Westerville, Ohio.
Yeah.
And so it was right there that the whole movement was, and Presbyterians were part of Prohibition for the most part, which is why you very rarely go to a Presbyterian church where you'll find wine serving communion. But if you're a Lutheran church, an Episcopal church, or a Catholic church, those folks were never part of the Prohibition movement. And so you'll always find those things there. And like anything else, I don't think there's a good or bad. It's about wisdom. It's about knowing oneself. There have been churches from those traditions that I've been a part of where the alcohol consumption is plentiful, and it all seems great until it isn't.
The First Community Church now permits it.
Yeah.
Which is a real departure. But at the ecumenical receptions, the 50-million punch was always a lot more interesting than the Presbyterian.
Indeed. Yeah. So we are out of time, but I want to mention a couple things at least about loving God or spirit. By spirit, what I mean, spirit, soul, I don't know how to distinguish these things. But I have an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about our body, right? I have an idea of that. When I think of spirit or soul, I think of the nonverbal parts of who we are. So cultivating practices that are non-verbal, that aren't about thinking in the traditional sense. And the Bible's full of verses about meditation. May my meditation be pleasing to you, O God, for I rejoice in the Lord. And so cultivating some form of contemplative practice, whatever that might be, meditation, centering prayer. We know what welcoming prayer is. Welcoming prayer comes also out of the centering prayer movement, which is a Christian meditation movement. And here's a really cool poem that describes the welcoming prayer. This is by Rumi. The guest house. This human being is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and retain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So the welcoming prayer is about taking any emotion, positive, negative, and welcoming it into your spirit. So joy comes, you spend time quietly sitting and say, welcome, joy. I'm so glad you're here. And you let joy come and sit at the table of your psyche. And joy can stay as long as joy wants to stay. And then learning to do the exact same thing with the darker, more difficult emotions, which is where, for most of us, it gets a lot harder. Welcome rage. So glad you're here. You can stay as long as you need to. Welcome grief. So glad you're here. So you welcome each one of the emotions that our bodies feel and not avoiding them. Because when we avoid them or tell them to go away, they simply go underground. They will stay and persist and keep knocking until we give them the space that they need, because they've been sent here as a guide to help you deal with the life that is yours to live. There have been periods here where I did this. I didn't realize this was a Rumi poem. It was, of course, the Blessed Katie Kinnison who brought this poem to my attention a couple weeks ago when I was describing my practice that I just kind of developed on my own, which was spending time with my hand over my heart, going through each emotion and doing precisely this. Welcome, sadness. So glad you're here. And spending time with you. You can stay as long as you like. She said, did you know there's a Rumi poem about that? No, I didn't. But that's pretty cool that I stumbled my way into something that Rumi knew a long time ago. So loving God with your spirit is about finding those quiet practices, whatever they might be. We have a group that does centering prayer here every Thursday morning, about 8:30 usually to 9, 8:45 to 9:15, and we do 20 minutes of silence, meditative silence. Centering prayer, like I said, is a form of Christian prayer. I've got a couple books over there that describe it, but it's so simple. It's not about trying to calm your thoughts down, which is what we heard about mindfulness 2 weeks ago. It's not about telling your mind to be quiet. It's about sitting quietly. And then as the thoughts come, and as the distractions come, and as I got to do those emails before, as they come, and then you notice yourself, distracted, you notice yourself attaching onto something, you have a sacred word that you return to, word or words, and you simply say that word in your mind as a quiet way to recenter yourself. And those words can be anything. Love, Christ, peace. For years I used let go, and then I stopped using let go because of the welcoming prayer practice, where I realized I was telling myself how to feel. And I stopped doing that. I don't need to let go of things. I can just be. So now my sacred word these days is hold me. It's hold me. Tori.
Would you be able to say a sentence or two about next week's forum and our sound bath with Katie Overly? Because
Why don't you? Because you know more about it than I do.
Okay, so following up on all that Joel has said today, next week we are going to have a special forum with Katie Overly, who is Betsy Sebastian's daughter. Katie is a licensed marriage and family therapist who's not working in a traditional therapy way right now. She's offering a sound bath experience, and what that will be is she will sing a little. She has singing bowls that she will use with us, and it is a meditative experience. It's nonverbal. It is very good for those who are uncomfortably having strong emotions right now. Very grounding, very centering, and something a bit different. Definitely working at that base level with the amygdala and all of the nonverbal hurts that we may bring. So yeah. And you can just sit in your chair and listen to these things next week. I think that goes really well for those of us who appreciate the value in centering prayer, but who need something to be presented upon which we can focus.
Yep.
So there will be some really gorgeous sounds for us to hear.
And with all of that, I appreciate you saying that, Tori, because do find the one that works for you. It does not have to be centering prayer, but there are a million different meditative ways, there are a million different ways to do it. Find the one that works for you in the timeline and the space that you have. Very last things I gotta go, of course, we all do, because we have an awesome service coming up here. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least suggest loving God with our minds. There's this really lovely daily prayer, PCUSA app. So if you go to your app store and search PCUSA daily prayer, I use it every day. It's got the lectionary readings for that day. It also has readings from the confessions if you want them. So I'm reading from the Westminster Confession every day. The Our Bible app is an app. That one is more pay focused. PCUSA prayer one is free. And that one has progressive Christian devotions. So if you want devotions and not just the raw Bible, the Our Bible app is fantastic. Another way to love God with our mind is gratitude practices, right? It's gratitude journaling. So I've got a little app called Gratitude Jar, also totally free. I don't like paying for my apps. And that one, I just write down 3 things that I'm grateful for every day in my Gratitude Jar app. So there are a million different ways to do all of this, but finding ways in your life to love God with your body, with your spirit, and with your mind is what makes us whole. Actually, it's not. We're already whole. It awakens us to the wholeness that we already have. Let's go listen to some music. Blessings to you.